All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 385, Weeping and Gnashing of Teeth. I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks and the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. We have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, working in the background to make things happen. And tonight, we are going to go back and take a look at a bit of female behavior from the unwomen of UN Women. And yeah, I'm still going to call them that because they are little girls trapped in bodies that look like adults and occasionally sound like adults. But right now they're having a childish temper tantrum. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. We're going to gloat. Hell yes, we're going to gloat. And hell yes, they were asking for it. So there you go.
In case you're wondering why it is that gay men do that thing where they have the lisp and the various other speech impediments, and you may wonder why they do that, and you may think maybe they're trying to sound like women, but they're not. They're trying to sound like women who sound like children. And the point is that there are so many women who are trying to sound like children, and the point is we got into a place where women feel like they don't need to be anything more than children, and from there on we got into a point where men feel like they only need to sound like children, and we are here at this point where the majority of the population cannot get beyond the childish mindset. It's just that men are not forgiven for sounding like children, but women are.
Yeah, and the other half of that problem is that men feel like they cannot discipline their children properly. So, when the children start acting like children, men just step back and say, "Oh, well, let kids be kids."
Yeah. Once upon a time, society recognized that if women couldn't act like adults, then it would be necessary for men to be in charge of them to the degree of engaging in discipline if necessary. And women were like, well, we want adult rights, so we're willing to take on adult responsibilities. And the second half of that lasted about 5 minutes. And we ended up with a worldwide organization promoting the idea that no other kind of violence in the world is as important to deal with as the one that happens the least often out of every type of violence there is. Mm-hmm. And the only reason is because all those other types of violence primarily affect men or boys. It's only when it affects women or girls that it matters. Like that's where we are now.
So yeah, we don't hate gay men and we don't hate women. We hate children. We
don't hate children either.
I kind of hate children, but we hate adults acting like children. I think that's really when we say that, and that's what it is.
I strenuously object to adults acting like children.
Yes,
that I will say.
And that's what we're dealing with. That's the fact that gay men tend to speak lispily and with a bunch of
at least the swishy ones
of speech impediments. They're only doing that because they're emulating the women who have been emulating children for the longest time because they think they're nothing but children. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, we don't hate gay men, we don't hate women, we hate adults who act like children. And we've been dealing with this problem for some time, like centuries, maybe even a millennium, maybe ever since the advent of romantic chivalry, in which women were afforded the ability to act like children, and men were just told to act like the adults in charge of them. This has always been bollocks, and I don't feel the need to explain what bollocks means because I think you already know. All right, let's get on with it.
Yeah. So, before we get into what we're going to do tonight, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and boy, are we going to provoke the thoughts tonight. But as experience both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, let us get into the weeping and gnashing of teeth. So, UN Women, we've been, prior to our delving into the efforts of USAID's, the USAID's infection to try to override the U.S. federal government and essentially engage in a soft coup. Before we were talking about that, we were talking about, we'll just switch the page here for just a second. If I can remember which one, I might have closed it actually, but no, here it is. Okay, no, this isn't UN Women. But yeah, that's our after show. We're we're reading From Violence to Sexism: The Manosphere is Doing Real World Harm. And that is where we are right now. But UN Women had a few articles out about how to get rid of the manosphere because they do not like us. They believe us to be the bad guys.
What is this real world? Do they think that they live in? I mean, what level of reality do they think that they exist in? That is, because it's certainly different from ours.
Yeah.
It's where a man is a woman if they say so, and a woman is a man if they say so. That's what reality is. It's whatever we say it is. So,
yeah.
All right, shut up.
But they had a couple of articles. What is the manosphere and why should we care? And then, of course, they wanted to counter the manosphere's toxic influence. How to counter the manosphere's toxic influence. And among the things that we had looked at previously, their plan to rescue the world from the evil influence of fathers that want to raise their own children, and men who want the same access to public education as women, and guys who want their due process rights respected when they go to court. Guys that don't want to be treated as criminals before they have even had the opportunity to not do anything or to do anything, right? So they're definitely going to get rid of advocates for those guys. Definitely going to eliminate the entire manosphere. All of those men out there that are talking about how important it is for men to get regular checkups to avoid dying from prostate cancer, those horrible, demonic, evil men that are, trying to get other men to work together for their own physical, or not physical therapy, but psychological therapy in places like men's sheds that are male only. So you have men helping men to handle men's problems, express their feelings in ways that feel more comfortable for men. Things like that. The whole demonic effort at stopping male suicide. Like, how dare they stop male suicide? Those evil men. Right? That's what UN Women opposes. Is these groups out there like us that don't want men to kill themselves, don't want children to grow up fatherless, and men to have their hearts broken at the loss of their families, don't want husbands to get divorce raped in court, don't want men to get jailed for things they didn't do. All of that, they want us to stop doing that, because doing that somehow hurts women. Those poor innocent women. They can't go into court and lie anymore, and get a man jailed in order to make sure he doesn't get to see his kids. We're really, really dangerous. We're terrible people for doing that. How dare we? And that's what we've been reading about from UN Women. So of course, when they lose their funding, they're going to be completely honest about why they want it back, right? They're going to definitely put it out there that they need that money so that they can fight the evil manosphere and stop men from gaining equal treatment under the law, and not being presumed bad parents, not being presumed criminals just because they have an outie instead of an innie in the genital area.
If you could scroll this article down a bit, Hannah, you can show the audience.
What did they actually do?
Yeah, it's a woman in a headscarf. It's the Elon Omars of the world
with crutches.
Look how these are the women who are suffering from this kind of US funding cuts, confirmed ending life-saving support for women and girls. Yeah, they're talking about
the field of emotion or anything.
The women in the Muslim world, such as Somalia, and there's still a shitload of things said about. I mean, given that we're talking about stuff that's happened in the US as it relates to women of that particular complexion who might happen to be wearing headscarves, and
but they could just come to the United States and start businesses. No.
I mean, we don't. Yes, they can, but we don't want them. Sorry.
Well, and they can, but that's not what they're doing. They're coming to the United States and claiming to be running businesses, and then getting government money, and not actually doing the business of the business that they claim to have. So, yeah. And interestingly, I believe the establishment knew that was going to happen. And the reason I believe the establishment knew that was going to happen is because I happen to have had the opportunity to watch a few different bits of popular media, or at least they were trying to be popular media. One of them was the Stephen King Castle Rock show, and the Stephen King. The other one was the one about dairy, right? And then I believe it's the Castle Rock one that has Somalians building a mall in Castle Rock, and of course they picked by sheer accident. They picked Salem's Lot to build it in, or build it on top of, which was brilliant. But if you know your history of Stephen King stuff, you understand why that's a bad place to build anything.
Yeah.
But the point of it is that they were doing what they said they were doing in the area where they said they were doing it. The money that they were using for it, was seed money from their own other businesses, and they weren't ripping anybody off. And of course, that's a TV show, and that was made specifically to create the impression that any objections to large groups of Somalian entrepreneurs in your community is just racism. You are an evil racist. It's not accountability, and it has nothing to do with whether or not they are actually providing the services that your tax dollars are going to them to provide. It's just because you don't like people with whatever color skin isn't yours.
And now that we're talking about Somali communities in Minnesota, I have to offer the counter argument, which is, of course, get the fuck out. Get the fuck out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get the fuck out. Get out of my community. Get out. Get out. Get out. I mean, I'm gonna continue to say get out and get the fuck out and various iterations on this imploration to get the fuck out and get out and get the fuck out and get out and get out, because that seems to be the counter argument. Get the fuck out of our community, which you'll notice the irony, right?
Yeah.
Because Nick Shirley's latest video dropped just now, and he and his compatriot kept saying it's about fraud, it's about fraud, it's fraud, it's fraud, and they kept saying that same word over and over and again, but their opponents kept just saying get out, get the fuck out, get out, get out, get the fuck out, get out. I'm like, okay, we're dealing with two different reiterations of the same argument over and over again. But one of these is a great deal more ironic than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Somalis who have come here to defraud us, defraud the Americans, defraud the Minnesopians or whatever it is of.
How they came to Springfield,
Minnesopians.
Minnesopians.
Remember the whole they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. That was about Haitian and Somali refugees in Springfield, Ohio. So,
but yeah, the great irony I have to point out is that their mantra of choice is get the fuck out of our community. And as soon as we say, good point.
No.
Perhaps you could get the fuck out of our community.
I mean, and the most ironic thing I think of all of this is that the quote for Minnesota is Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
Right. Well, So these people are. This is nice. This is y'all being nice. No. It is just beyond. My God, I'm flabbergasted, and yeah,
it's hard to look at the discussion and the way that people are behaving in the discussion and not wonder sometimes if people are absolute morons. In Minnesota has had a lot of, like, the Duluth model came out of Minnesota. And there's an account on
that makes perfect sense.
That if you want to know how bad things are in Minnesota and how much stupid has come out of Minnesota, see if I can find, not offhand. Dang it! I'll have to. There's an account that I follow, and we've had discussions about this here on the channel too. But like, the guy's name is Tony, and he has a whole history of the insanity that has come out of Minnesota. Mm. It's like there's something bad in the water in Minnesota. Like, if Stephen King were writing about real life places where there's just sort of all sorts of evil shit that comes out of that place that you kind of wonder if there's, a demon hiding in a cave somewhere making bad stuff happen. Minnesota would be his area that he would be writing about, not made up communities in Maine. But that's the way it is. But in any case, they have the same tactics that UN Women has in regard to having their money taken away or having their ability to do the scammy things taken away, right? The daycares that weren't daycares, the buildings where no children were going to get care while their parents were at work, and no
Leering
education
Center
was taking place. Yes, the Leering Center.
There's no
send your daughters to
education.
the
There's no education taking place in the Leering Center. I guarantee
yes, guys,
you, people.
send your daughters to the Leering Center, right? Send your sons to the Leering Center.
Like that should have been Nick Shirley's mantra. We're just leering. We're just
leering together.
Because
Right.
leering is a word. It means looking,
Yes.
but with
spelled
with
differently.
nefarious intent. Yeah,
Yeah.
we spell differently, but we're just here to leer. What's wrong with leering?
Yeah.
We're just here to leer. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
You leer, you learn.
Yep. Oh, boy, do you. But yeah, their response to that was, "Oh, this is gonna have a terrible effect on all of the women and children that are no longer being served by these
The ones that
daycares
never
that don't
existed.
do anything."
The ones that never existed in the fucking first place.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is just honestly, I really believe this is almost it's very akin to the same schemes and frauds that UN Women is pushing upon the
Yes,
rest of us,
yes.
right? It's the same fucking thing. It's a fraud. It's a scheme. You are telling us that there's people in this region that need our help. They just need our assistance, and then you go there and you find a fucking Leering Center.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now, today, with money that they've already taken out of your wallet, UN Women is funding organizations that are operating in Africa with intent to break up people's marriages.
Mm.
And we talked about this on previous episodes of HBR Talk. They are literally training young women to hold suspicion toward their husbands and their fathers. And they're doing things like holding classes in which they treat normal cultural practices of the local area, in which it's normal for women to be very cautious about their sexual decisions and turn to their families for advice about these things, as opposed to a bunch of old biddies who probably are 3 or 4 times divorced, and instead of being told you should screw everything that moves and then get mad when nobody wants to settle down with you after you've hit the wall, they're growing up learning that their bodies are special and valuable, and that they should save sexual activity for when they plan to have children, so that they're not raising them in abject, starving poverty. Because that is the reality in Africa. If you screw around when you're not prepared to support a child, you end up raising your child in profound, abject, starving, disease-ridden poverty in several nations there, many nations there. Not all, obviously. There are nations in Africa that are practically first world nations, and some that aren't.
There's a big difference between West Africans and East Africans.
Yes.
I mean, people like to talk about Europeans like they're all the same, and in other instances they like to talk about Hispanics and North Europeans like they're not the same. Meanwhile, all Africans are African. You like the idea of an African American, as though anyone from Africa, as long as they have the same skin tone, is the same. But West Africans and East Africans have as much in common as North Europeans and South Europeans. Less, actually. Have much less of a problem with West Africans than I have with East Africans, and it's largely because West Africans were largely influenced by Christendom, and East Africans are largely influenced by Islam. Not to mention North Africans, who are entirely they're not even dark-skinned persons that have any relation to sub-Saharan Africans. North Africa is entirely Arabic at this point. Like, it's not even the same. They don't have anything in common. But as far as sub-Saharan, we still have West Africans and East Africans, and people like to talk about them as though they're completely the same, but they are absolutely not. When we talk about slavery, particularly slavery in the US, the people who were taken as slaves in the US are almost entirely West African, because that's how the shipping routes worked, and because Christendom invaded from the West, and that's where they got most of their slaves, albeit sold to them by West African kings, and that was how that worked. But East Africa is an entirely different kettle of fish. East Africans were ransacked by Muslims, and I don't even know where I start with the complexity of that, and that's how we got people from Egypt and from Djibouti and from Eritrea and from Somalia. That's about as far south as they got. And it all came to head in Ethiopia. Nobody conquered Ethiopia, arguably, but Somalia is on the border of Ethiopia, and that was as far as the Muslims got into Islamifying Africans. And Somalia is what happens when East Africans get Islamified. And
Yep.
I don't know how to say this without sounding as racist as I possibly can, but there are ways in which Africans can be civilized, and there are ways in which Africans can be de-civilized. Islam de-civilized them in the worst possible way, and that's how you get Somalians. There are bad things about every race, and there are good things about every race. But when you take East Africans, who were already kind of backward, and then you infuse them with the worst kind of Islam, that's when you get some Somalians. And yeah, I should probably stop talking, but I think you get what I'm saying. Like,
it does change. It does change the way people live. In a very bad way that results in a great deal of poverty and an explosion of, for instance, the nations that have been. You would think, right, that a conservative religion exploding across an area would result in a reduction in things like STIs, but it hasn't, because UN Women has been funding organizations that are in there teaching them that the magic circumcision ritual will do a better job of stopping them from getting AIDS than wearing condoms will. And yeah, but go ahead, Lauren.
I was gonna say I happen to believe that even though the religion might not be the most progressive, if I can use that term in this sense, but I fully believe, if I'm looking at the physiognomy with the shape of the heads and the buck teeth, something happened over there, and maybe it was chemical warfare, but there is something. Somebody said that the Somalian family tree is a pole.
Yeah, that's if you have if your culture becomes dominated by a religion that essentially says science doesn't matter anytime there's a question. They don't even like. At least Christians will try to work out how Christianity and science are not contradicting each other.
Yeah.
And among those things, you get rules like maybe it's not the best idea for a guy to have a whole bunch of different wives because he'll die when he's 40.
And your kids will be fucking their siblings and marrying and
Yes,
fucking their siblings, and
and
so
that
that's how that happens.
yep.
Right. So I get it. It's just
And it's not that it's that the men are evil for living their culture. It's that the science tells you if you limit the number of men who reproduce, you get a whole population where half the population is related to the other half of the population. It becomes very difficult to find somebody that you can be with without inbreeding, and
yeah.
that happens in more than one area. It's not just one country, and that's played out in a lot of different ways. It's one of the reasons why the U.S. kind of outlawed that practice,
Right.
where one guy monopolizes a bunch of different wives, and it's why it normally I don't mind learning about different religions and different religions, making their sales pitch, I guess you could say, on TV and everything. But I absolutely despise the show Sister Wives.
I was just about to say,
Because
right?
yeah,
Like, because we're not talking about religion. If we're talking about the culture, I mean, the two are kind of basically intertwined, right? And it's hard to kind of draw the lines between where one ends and the other begins. Um, but like,
limiting your gene pool is just unwise.
correct, right? And
Right.
that's fine. But what you don't see is the Mormons. And maybe it's happening. I don't know. Maybe Nick Shirley hasn't uncovered that leaf, right? He hasn't turned over that rock. But I don't see the Mormons going in and making a whole bunch of millions of fucking dollars off of this daycare fraud
Yeah.
because they're
Mormons
they
don't need daycare.
right. Well, exactly, and but for the same reason that the
Yeah.
Somalian women do not need daycare,
Daycare.
they
Yeah.
they don't work. Their religion tells them that they should not. The women should be at home taking care of the children. Right? Perfectly fine. I mean, oh my God, how is anybody against that? This is the way it was for eons, forever, right? Women stayed home and took care of the children. That's the natural order of things, if you're asking me. And if you're still listening to this, then you're asking me.
There
uh,
you go.
right. Women are the caretakers. They are the first teacher of the child. They breed the children. They feed the children with their own bodies, right? Why should they be forced out into the work field, right? To go and do a job and punch into a clock and then come home and have to then serve another fucking job. And I feel like I sound like a feminist when I make this argument, but I don't give a fuck. It's just I am arguing on the side that men should be the breadwinners. Men should be the one going out into the field. Women should stay out of the workforce and stay home and raise the children. We would have so much more of a balance in society, we wouldn't have these problems. Women wouldn't have, Renee Good would not have enough time to get out into her fucking car. So, first off,
Yeah,
sorry,
I don't know about Renee Good, man. I think she would have been an outcast.
well, but
But
this is
in
no, no,
terms
no, no,
of
no. She dropped off
she's
her
a
kid
busybody.
at daycare, right? Drove from wherever the fuck she was into Minnesota. I think it was Indiana. 5 hours
Hmm.
across state lines to go. I'm gonna protest against ICE. And she thought that was a good idea. If she was at home, if she was a good mother, if she was a good person, she would have been home taking care of her children instead.
Yeah.
And here
But
we are.
she lost custody of a couple of her children,
Yes,
and
she
that's
did.
a
Yes,
rather
she did.
difficult thing for a woman to do. So I'm,
Yes,
I'm wondering there. But in any
yes,
case,
she did. And from what I heard, what I heard, I haven't seen the actual facts. She was burning cigarettes out on her children.
well, we don't know if we don't know
We
the actual facts,
we
but
don't know,
I
and
can
I
tell you
don't
this.
know, but
I can tell you this. It is very difficult to get custody away from a woman, um,
absolutely.
especially if she's fighting for it. And if somebody actually, uh, if the father gets custody and not the state, he has had to prove not only that he is highly capable as a parent and can support the children and is going to provide care for the children and nurturing and so on, has a good environment for the children, but he also has to prove that the environment the children are in with the mother is so bad that it's a danger to them. In order to cut custody off from her, like getting equally shared parenting rights, getting joint custody, getting shared parenting, that's one thing. And we hear all the time about how, fathers that go for custody get it X% of the time. And, well, mothers that go for custody get it a higher percent of the time than fathers. And the question becomes, when you add them up, it's more than like 150% total between the two. So the question becomes, what's going on there? Well, the reality is they're lumping in shared parenting, joint custody, and so on with fathers going for full custody. It's not the same. And when you examine cases in which fathers are going for full custody, in which the mother has things like supervised visitation or no visitation, it's very rare for a man to actually get that.
Mm-hmm.
Much more rare than when women being granted that. And women can do something men can't. They can go into the court and say, he beats me, and therefore he shouldn't be able to see his children.
Mm-hmm.
And the court doesn't vet that accusation. If the father cannot conclusively prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she is lying about him, he's screwed.
Yeah.
Whereas if a man goes to court and says, she hits me with a frying pan, therefore she shouldn't be around the children, the court doesn't treat it the same. Well, just because she's a threat to you doesn't mean she's a threat to the children. Or
Mm-hmm.
worse, what did you do to make her angry?
Right.
Right? And I'm going to bring this up forever because I'm never going to stop being angry about it. A few years ago, I've had a lot of guys talk to me about their cases because it's how I got into the men's rights movement, was dealing with a case like this where women make false allegations and a guy is trying to just protect his child, right? And so I've had a lot of guys ask me, what did you learn from that case that could help me? And I tell people mostly the same thing, starting with the fact that documentation is absolutely vital,
Mm-hmm.
and you absolutely have to walk into court with your ducks in a row because the court is already going to be against you from the get go.
Right.
But this guy, his ex had some very serious mental health symptoms that indicated a level of instability that made her dangerous to anyone who was dependent on her.
Mm.
She did things like just running off and abandoning the family for years, and then coming back and wanting to live with him and the kids. And she joined a cult. She had all kinds of strange ideas. There was a lot there. And because she was impoverished due to her own choices as a result of her mental health condition going untreated or not being properly treated,
Mhm.
the judge decided in that case that he had, even though they were separated and divorced and stuff, the father had to allow his ex-wife to move back in with him so she could be there to mother her child. And and that's the way it was put.
Jesus.
And not their child. And he basically had to tolerate her presence until she could get back on her feet.
Mhm.
And one day while he was at work, she murdered their child. She stabbed the child to death. And when this happens with a man where the wife warns the court system, this man is unstable, he has been violent, here is the list of stuff he has done, and it looks like the kind of behavior this woman had engaged in. The courts give full custody to the mother. The father gets supervised visitation. They don't mess around. They protect the children. But when it's a woman, she can sit there with this look on her face, poor me, I'm in trouble, and play victim of the situation. And the court shows sympathy, not to the children, but to the mother. And you get the children being exposed to a woman who is later going to murder them, stab them to death. And that this isn't a unique case. It's just a case that I actually happen to be in communication with someone involved in it. And
Consider the difference between Ilan Omar and Omar Fateh. You probably don't even remember the name Omar Fateh. He's the Somalian guy who looks like a buck-toothed broom handle. You know
That's
that
all
guy.
of them. That's all of them.
That's the general description of Somalis. But you know the guy I'm talking about, the guy who tried to run for mayor of Minneapolis. That particular
Oh
guy.
yeah.
He had the fucking bulb head and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and he couldn't get in because he wasn't pleasing to the eye like Ilan Omar was. Ilan Omar has got into this position of power and has been there for fucking 7 years or whatever it is, because she is easy on the eye because she has just the right skin tone and she has just the right level of
neoteny.
of aesthetic neoteny, even though
And just the right husband.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and even though she is extremely viscerally rude to the reporters who talk to her, as you may have seen over the past few weeks, whenever some reporter tries to talk to her in the street, and she's like, there is something wrong with your brain. You cannot. I'm sure you are saying what these Republicans say, but you are stupid. There is something wrong with your brain. But she can get through. Ilan Omar has always been able to get through in a way that Omar Fateh has never been able to get through, because she's the most easy on the eye Somalian that anyone has been able to get through, and that's the original problem in a nutshell. That as long as you're reasonably neotenous. You can be the coat hanger on which $9 billion of fraud can hang itself on. And
Yeah.
and that's why Ilan Omar will never be out of a job. Whereas Omar Fateh will never be in with the job, because it's all based on whatever woman you can get into a position of power, and however neotenous that woman is. And yeah, it pisses me off that people keep blaming this on white liberal women, where no, it's just as applicable to Somalian liberal women, whatever liberal even means anymore. It just means
Well, they use the term
it,
liberal when they're describing communists.
it just means fuck America and
Yeah.
big up everyone else. Yeah.
Yeah. So back to the bit though about the natural order of things and so on. Like historically, when you look at the way that children were raised, up until the Industrial Revolution, both parents had a significant amount of influence on the kids, and kids started learning a trade. Their education wasn't sitting in a classroom being told that they might have been born in the wrong body. It was practical. If your father was a shoemaker, you learned how to make shoes. If your father worked in the military, you learned military protocol. You learned how to fight, and you might become law enforcement or military, when you grew up. If your parents had a farm, you learned everything about farming, and and so on. If your father was a doctor, you learned about medicine. And same thing with little girls. Whatever their mother did, they learned. If their mother was a midwife, they learned midwifery. And if their mother had to work outside the home, which did happen, even before the Industrial Revolution, poor women have always had to work. Poor women who lived under actual poverty conditions would do work at home. They'd teach their kids to also do that work. So your housework, yes, the woman was in charge of the housework, but as she might have, 3 or 4 daughters helping her with it at different ages, doing different levels of work, and she might go to the homes of people who made more money than her family did and do their laundry and their cleaning or their cooking. And that was normal. That was normal for a very long time, going back to before, back to when there wasn't work. And yeah, if their mother was a prostitute, mangaka, they learned the same thing. The oldest profession, right? Although I think the oldest profession was probably stealing. But in any case, this was the norm. And there wasn't anything wrong with children learning from their parents. There wasn't anything wrong with parents having access to their children far more than they do today. I think there's something wrong with the way that we do things today that keeps parents away from their children for more of the day than they get to spend time with them, and subjects the children to the opinions and lifestyle choices of strangers without parental involvement and supervision. Parents are kept so busy today that until something dangerous or bad happens, until their kid comes to them with a problem, they often don't know the kid is being told things in school that should not be inflicted on children. Right? But in any case, all of that said, when it comes down to it, the biggest source of opposition to the natural order of things, parents staying together, families staying together, and children having the nurturing care of both parents comes from organizations that are supported by world government organizations like UN Women. And UN Women themselves, their advocacy, their litany, is all about accusing men of being abusive and claiming that, if they don't get enough money, women all over the world are just going to die. And I'm not exaggerating here. They literally have said, this decision will have devastating impacts on women and girls and the health and aid workers who serve them in the world's worst humanitarian crises. So, Doctors Without Borders is not a UN Women organization. They go all over the world and they assist people with health care, right? All over the world. And they assist people with health care in the world's most humanitarian crises. UN Women gives money to organizations that go all over the world and promote abortion to women in cultures where it is not normal to kill your babies before they are born. Then we have the USAID grants. Who? Because we were talking about UN Women. USAID has been exposed as a huge money laundering fiasco. So why is the United Nations, in an article about UN Women losing their funding, why are they talking about USAID? That USAID's infection that's been spread all over the world. It is because UN Women's money, a lot of it was part of that money laundering scheme. Right? The USAID grants were designated to provide critical maternal health care, like abortion, protection from violence, rape treatment, and other life-saving care in humanitarian settings. This includes UNFPA's work, that's UN Women, to end maternal death, safely deliver babies, and address horrific violence faced by women and girls in places like Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine. By the way, next week we're going to be looking at an article in which talking about a woman who has lured men from various countries to the Russian front in Ukraine to become soldiers, and she has conned the shit out of them. And it's a hell of an article. I looked at it a little bit before the show, and y'all are going to get pissed off as fuck when you hear this article. But yeah, let's translate this, right? To end maternal death. So let's start out with that. You know which country has one of the highest rates of maternal death in the first world?
USA?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you include abortion, right? Yeah.
Nope. No, maternal death. That is, now, maternal death, the definition, the way they've described it, when they count up the numbers, the statistics are based on defining maternal death as the death of a woman at any point between when she becomes pregnant and within the first year after childbirth. So that's essentially a 2-year time span. And it doesn't just count things like, you have had some health condition and it's related to your pregnancy specifically, and you die as a result of the wear and tear on your body from pregnancy and childbirth. It includes things like the mother committed suicide, the mother was in a car accident and died, the mother was killed in a crime, right? And in fact, I've had feminists try to tell me that the leading cause of maternal death is getting killed by the mother's partner, male partner, And of course, I looked into that, and actually, the leading cause of maternal death is cardiovascular issues and cardiopulmonary issues. So essentially, it is things that happen if you are too fat, or if you use drugs, or if you have a genetic predisposition toward certain cardiopulmonary and cardiovascular conditions, not violence of any kind, actually, unless you consider it self-violence to destroy your health and then do something that puts a strain on it, and then you die from it. So this idea of we're going to spend a shit ton of money in the United States to end maternal death in other countries, but apparently we can't end it here, can we? And part of the reason, like the most dangerous threat to pregnant women in the United States, according to statistics on the causes of maternal death in the United States, the single biggest threat to women who are pregnant in the United States is the women themselves. And second only to that is the fat acceptance movement, which is a feminist gig. So yeah. But yeah, we need to spend billions of dollars all around the world to protect women in other countries by exporting the ideology that has led to women in the United States ignoring their health and then dying during their pregnancy from heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular issues, right? The next one, safely deliver babies. The organizations that we looked at in past episodes of HBR Talk that are funded by UN Women seek to remove the single most important factor in a family that contributes to the protection of mothers and children, that being the dad. We looked at courses where girls role play conversations and circumstances with each other in which men are the bad guys and the only smart people in the room are women, and it's better to not be married, to not have a man in your life. And of course, this is supposed to help women achieve the circumstances needed to be healthy and safe during their pregnancy. Meanwhile, these same organizations are also setting up abortion clinics in those countries. So I'm not quite sure exactly what this does to help safely deliver babies. I think probably, again, Doctors Without Borders probably does more. And then the next part of that, address horrific violence faced by women and girls in places like Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine. Right. Now, those are 3 war zones. And at least one of them, the women all fled. They got the fuck out. The men were not allowed to leave Ukraine. They got drafted. In fact, we just recently did a show in which horrific violence was visited upon men who resisted being randomly drafted by roving gangs of government officials that would just grab them off the street without any type of process to determine whether they were eligible or not and needed or not. But women and girls are the ones that needed to help, apparently. UN Women wants to take all your money to protect the women and girls that chose to stay in Ukraine instead of leaving. And of course, they're in supposedly more danger than the men who are being beat to hell and murdered. We looked at that site on busification. Those men are actually being beaten to death. Their families aren't even getting an explanation as to what happened to them. Right? Sudan, civil war. And again, okay, horrific violence. There are women in the fighting forces there, so that's a bit of a different story. But it's still mostly the men that are facing horrific violence. Everything that women and girls are facing is happening to men 10 times over, and the women that it is happening to are not as obligated to engage as the men are. Same with Gaza. They could get out. They could leave. And nobody would fault them because what is happening there kind of constitutes a civil war as well. Or an uncivil war. I don't know. I don't know how to phrase that. But and that violence is taking place on both sides. And targeting men, women, and children, and pets on both sides. But they're only worried about the women. And they're not worried about the fact that women are engaging in violence as well. So this is what we're looking at, weeping and gnashing of teeth. You're not giving us your money to go into these areas and focus entirely on women, even though most of the victims are fighting age men.
Oh,
I assume you all know that the reference of weeping and gnashing of teeth is a biblical reference.
Yep.
That's what
Yep,
hell.
that was on purpose.
That's what hell is like. The weeping and gnashing of teeth.
See,
And it's-
my thought was to where the wild things are,
Hmm.
where they gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws until Max said, "Be still," and he tamed them with a magic trick, staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they
I
were
love you.
frightened.
I
And they
love you,
called
baby.
him the most wild thing of all. And they named him the king of all wild things.
That
Yeah,
was one of my favorite stories growing up.
I love
And yeah,
that
and like
story.
so many of these things, and like so much of Shakespeare is based on the Bible. Like so many of our most beloved literature is based on the Bible. Yeah, all of this is based on this idea of hell versus heaven, and yeah, that's what weeping and gnashing of teeth originally meant. It was this depiction of hell. That it's of the weeping and gnashing of teeth forever, and I don't know how we get this across to people, be they religious or non-religious, but yeah, it's all to some degree it's smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
Yeah, when it comes to this, yeah. I mean, these are women who are not, they're playing victim of something that is their own doing, right? If they had chosen to take the money that was being given to them through the UN, through the United States, through the countries that donate, that give money, and actually do the things they are claiming that they did, and promote harmony between men and women, and try to teach families, to build unity around love and care, around if I'm pronouncing it right, storge. The idea that your family comes first and the people in your family are the people that you love the most and take care of, and you don't engage in violence toward them. You show them that you are there to protect them and care for them and provide for them, male or female. Then they would still have that funding. There would not have been reason for there still would have been, from an ANCAP position, that we don't need to pay an organization to do that. But it would have been a lot harder to convince the public that it was a good idea to take the money that was being given to that organization and put it to other uses instead. Whereas, going around the world and promoting the breakup of families, demonizing men, suggesting that abortion is the best route for women to take, and promoting a bunch of unhealthy practices against men and boys, like that doesn't lend itself to defending your organization against being defunded. And here's a prime example, right? The UN agency partners with 150 countries to provide access to a wide range of sexual and reproductive health services, it says. Its goal is ending unmet needs for family planning, preventing maternal death, gender-based violence, right? Gender-based violence, as if there is no violence that comes from the female side. Harmful practices, including child marriage and female genital mutilation, but not male genital mutilation by, what is that year? 2030. So this is part of the 2030 agenda, is it? When they say this, when they say family planning, they mean abortion. They don't mean teaching young women to make careful use of all of their options to prevent unplanned conception that would put their family in adverse circumstances. Nope, they are promoting abortion. It's about abortion. When they say preventable maternal death, they're not talking about teaching women to make healthy choices before they get pregnant. They're talking about young women making the dumbest choices and then relying on the state to rescue them from their circumstances. When they say gender-based violence, they are saying that it doesn't matter when women are violent toward men. It only matters when men are violent toward women. Even though women are violent toward men 3 times as much. And then when they just say vaguely harmful practices. Harmful practices covers in UN women speak everything from actual bad ideas to the idea that marriage is one man and one woman and that children should be raised by both of their parents, and things like if your culture still has some sort of a dowry system, regardless of whether the dowry system is the bride brings money into the family, or because of the value the bride brings into the family, the groom has to replace that value in the family she's leaving by giving money to that family when he marries her, which, depending on the nation and the history, dowry has gone both ways historically. So things like that, it can be actually quite valuable to a family unit if the woman comes in with a nest egg, especially if you're in a country where, aside from that nest egg, most people are pretty poor. Personally, And here in the U.S., we haven't had a dowry system as a cultural norm throughout the entire existence, I think, of the country, for the most part. Whereas in Europe, it was pretty normal. In the U.S., I don't know of a whole lot of history. Like maybe women would take some amount from their family with them when they got married. But a girl in high school could start as soon as she's old enough to legally work, which is 16, could get a part-time job, work part-time while she's in high school, spend a couple of years working full-time when she gets out of high school, sock most of that money away, and come out of it with a pretty decent down payment on a house, on a mortgage, and take that into her marriage, and there would be a few things that would happen because she had a financial investment in the marital property. She would be more likely to place value on the marriage and place value on remaining loyal and wanting to stay close with her husband, maintaining her relationship. And of course, that little head start, that economic head start, would prevent a lot of the existing poverty, which in the U.S., what we call poverty is a whole different animal than what is poverty in certain nations in Africa and South America, where people who are poor actually don't have food, and they can't just go to the government and get it. Right? They can't just go to, there's not a food bank in their neighborhood that they can go to and get it. Like poverty in the United States is poverty light compared to poverty in third world nations and even in second world nations. So it's not, I hate calling it poverty. It's, but compared to other people in the U.S., there is poverty. And there are people that are less educated. There are people that are less healthy because of it, right? And there are people that grow up and are also very low income because of it. And the cycle continues. But if there was a norm of young women building a nest egg and themselves, not asking their daddy for money, but building a nest egg themselves, they would grow up more. They would value their relationships more. They would work harder to make their marriages work. And their marriage would start out easier financially than it does in many, many cases. So like this idea that dowry is a bad thing, which is something that, UN Women has, we've read complaints by UN Women about dowry. In and of itself, it's not. Right? Entertaining family greed and behavior that is, abusive to the husband or the wife or both, because of a dowry system, that's stupid. It wrecks families and destroys people and sets the kids up to have less of a good life than they're going to have normally growing up. But when it's a cooperative effort where young men would seek a woman whose dowry building demonstrates maturity and carefulness, mindfulness, and women would have that mindfulness and that diligence and seek a man who respects that, you would have a lot more marital success. We wouldn't have a 50% divorce rate. We might drop as low as a 5% divorce rate. And when both parties are mutually invested, a relationship lasts much longer and works out much better. You are much more armored against whatever tough times do come along. When meteor falls out of the sky, when you get into a car accident, lightning strikes your house. Lightning struck my parents' house, by the way, twice, and a tornado hit, dropped a tree on the house once.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was a good house though. They both worked very hard, and they sought very carefully, and they actually managed to get a 2-story brick house during the 1970s. That was it was built in the the end of the 1800s, and then added on to after that. So a tree was dropped on the house. We had to get the roof fixed, and we had to get we had a porch that an earthquake had ripped off, and yeah, the one big earthquake Ohio had ripped off, and the insurance covered the rebuilding, and so they made an enclosed porch and used that as the meeting room for the family business. But all of the work that they put into that, they ended up. I'm not talking out of my ass here. I'm talking from experience. My mom, my dad put my mom through school, her last year of school, and then she put him through his last year of school with her salary from her first year of teaching. And they both worked till I was born. And then mom worked a lot less than dad after that, until my brother and I were old enough for her to increase the amount of work she did outside the home. Both of my parents worked throughout my entire childhood. Mom worked in the home. She did sewing and stuff like that. And then she ran for political office. She was on our city council, was president of the city council when I was in high school. Now that was when I was in college. She was at large when I was in high school, and which means you're not a ward councilman. You have to get votes from the whole city. And,
I thought that meant that she was on the run.
Yeah, she was councilman on the run. We're gonna go through your community and get your street paved, and then flee the scene so that you can't get mad about the cost of curbing and sidewalk. It's traditional for people outside the United States. One of the things that a lot of communities here do is, if the city repaves your street, you get a bill, not for the street, but they also redo the sidewalk that's beside the street and the curb. And if you're a landowner, you get a bill for the curbing and the cost of the curbing and the sidewalk, but not the street. And because that part is considered to be part of your property, but they're doing the work, and you can't say no to it. So people and mom had to fight for our side of town to get that done, because the city just assumed people on the less incoming side of town didn't want it. They had to go to city council and say, yes, we will pay for that. But yeah, so, just because women take care of the kids and take care of the family does not mean that they cannot earn money. We had a portrait studio in our house when I was in high school. Almost my entire senior class, my parents did their senior portraits. That was mostly my mom doing the portraits. So, women have a history of learning how to make money without taking any more time than they have to away from their families. Even, those of us that are doing it today. When my kids were growing up, I chose my work schedule based on my jobs that I took based on being able to organize my work schedule around when my kids were going to be at school. And when that wasn't possible, we arranged play dates back and forth, with other families that we were close to, things we were going to do anyway, around, well, I'll watch your kids while you're at work and you can watch mine while I'm at work, and we won't have to put our kids with strangers in a daycare system. We didn't need UN Women to tell us how to do that.
Mm-mm.
Right? That was, and that's essentially, they're going into countries where there is a traditional norm of people cooperating like that, extended families cooperating together, kids getting grandparent time if mom is going to go work somewhere, and kids getting time with friends, and women trading childcare with each other, women that they know and trust and who have similar child rearing philosophies. As opposed to this idea that every woman needs to go put on a suit and sit in an office someplace for 8 hours a day while her kid or kids sit in a daycare center if she didn't have all of them aborted.
Mm.
So they go on here, right? These termination notices include grants for which we had previously received humanitarian waivers, as they were considered life-saving interventions for the world's most vulnerable women and girls. And of course, they're talking about which countries: Afghanistan, Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Haiti, Mali, Sudan, Syria, and its neighboring countries, as well as Ukraine. So essentially a whole bunch of nations that have been at civil war within themselves, or otherwise subjected to warlike conditions by their own populations or their own governments for almost Gen X's entire lifetime. And they don't show the classes that we talked about, where they go in and learn how to consider men the enemy and treat fathers as the bad guys of the family, and to believe that being sexually promiscuous is a type of freedom, but having mindful governance over your own body and the decisions that you make with it is somehow not. No, they're just showing a pregnant woman getting an ultrasound. If you don't give us money, women will not be able to get ultrasounds.
Insidious.
Because no other organization will do that.
It's insidious.
Yeah. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. They're so angry, so upset. And they want you to feel guilty. They want you to think that all they've done out there is make sure women can get their ultrasounds and provide food and help female victims of rape, because they're not helping male victims of rape.
Mm-mm.
Speaking of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where it is used as a weapon of war against men, and this is an older conversation. We talked about this back when HBR was just one show on Blog Talk Radio, where we had articles that we shared, read segments from about what was going on in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Men there who are combatants in their civil war end up getting anally raped so brutally that they have lifelong injury from it, and some of them die. We're talking intestinal injury.
Mm.
And it is horrific. And yeah, that is violence against men by other men in war. And feminists will use the fact that the perpetrators are male to dismiss the violence as unimportant, as if, poof, if men would just stop hitting themselves, right? Even though it's not like men are a monolith, right? Feminists are always saying women are not a monolith. Well, men are not a monolith either. And if the majority of a type of violence in the world is inflicted on men by other men, that doesn't make it more important to address the female victims. It means that that type of violence itself needs to be examined so we can figure out how to discourage and eliminate it. Right? The poverty that UN Women talks about addressing, right? All these women in poverty, is because in these nations there is so much violence against the men that there are many women who live without providers but are unable to provide for themselves or unwilling. And rather than encourage the attitudes and lifestyle choices that would preserve the lives of more male protectors and providers, they want more and more money to go into those countries and hold classes with young girls in which they demonize men, which solves their problem exactly how?
Balls. 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 Nearly fell off my chair just now. Bullshit. Yeah, no, balls. I don't know what else to say. Balls!
Yeah. So, and I'm kind of curious here. What the interesting thing they're mentioning Afghanistan. I am surprised that Afghanistan allows UN women to operate in their country, considering that women are not allowed to go to doctors there.
Well, I mean, that's an easy answer. There's someone getting paid.
Yeah.
To
Well, it makes me question the whole narrative. Women are not allowed to go to doctors, but UN women can come in and give them ultrasounds.
Yeah.
Like, which one of those two things is true? Are they allowing UN women to come in or organizations funded by UN women to come in and give Afghan women gyno exams where the physicians are female? Are they allowing male physicians to do this?
Of course not. No way.
Or is it true that in the wake of the U.S. failure in Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda taking over, like we're told, women are being denied health care? Which one of those? Because those two things cannot both be true. If they are letting doctors into the country that are female, then it cannot also be true that they have legislation that says women cannot be doctors and women cannot go to male doctors, and therefore women cannot have medical treatment. Then we're talking about sexual and reproductive health services here. That's what it says right on the picture. Maternal health services. So this is gyno health services. This isn't somebody prescribing antibiotics because you got a cold, right? This is the speculum spelunking test, and the mammograms and the physician's exams that you get when you're pregnant, all the various things that they check you for, the blood tests and so on. Like, which is it? I'm a little confused here.
Balls! Balls, I say. I say balls to you. And I don't know where else you can go from here other than balls.
Yeah, I just like there's two stories here that are not compatible that are being told by women's organizations around the world about Afghanistan. Like Trump was demonized for this, even though it was Biden that fucked up the exit.
Mm-hmm.
Which is it? And then we also have, you know, they're saying 600,000 will lose sexual and reproductive health and gender-based prevention and response services. Here we're talking about what they're talking about there is domestic violence and sexual violence, right? And again, some of the nations that are listed here, I see several nations that are primarily Islamic or that have widespread Islam in the nation and are ruled by an Islamic law. Exactly how are they performing those services there if we are told that under Islamic law, women who make rape allegations are not believed, and women who make allegations of domestic violence are not believed? That the husband or male perpetrator or whatever gets away with it, and there's no recourse. Who are these services being provided to?
Very good question.
Similarly, in Ukraine, I don't think that the women who fled the country are getting services. So what exactly is UN Women doing in there? Like the only women who couldn't flee the country are trans women. Every biological woman and girl that wanted out was given leave to leave. Here they say in Gaza, 50,000 pregnant women will lose critical care from UN Women's mobile health teams. Question, with all of what's going on there, why, if it's such a terrible environment, are women choosing to conceive children and staying there after they've done so? Are they stupid?
I mean, there's a high likelihood.
Like, I'm if Michigan was bombing the shit out of Ohio, right, and then also sending armed soldiers into Ohio and committing atrocities against Ohioans, I don't think I would get pregnant in the middle of that and stay in Ohio.
Never.
If by some odd outcome I did get pregnant in the middle of that, I would get the fuck out of Ohio. But then again, I cared about my kids. But yeah. Oh, and by the way, this is up until now, this is like the worst thing that ever happened to UN Women, right? Except that they've been defunded several times by previous U.S. administrations under the accusation that it supports coercive abortion or forced sterilization. Claims that have been refuted by other U.S. administrations. So they're essentially citing the fight between the left and right wings of political, federal political administrations in the United States as proof of their innocence. And then they say independent investigations and leaders at UFNPA or UNFPA and the UN more broadly. But the reality is independent investigations have confirmed the allegations of coercive abortion and forced sterilization. And then UN Women comes out with reports that ignore some of the evidence, and they claim that's an independent investigation. Or the Democrats just simply deny it, and they claim that's evidence. UNFPA relies entirely on the voluntary donations of governments, intergovernment organizations, foundations, the private sector, and individuals. So let's start with the voluntary donations of governments. Right? If you are on a date with a gal and you want sex and she's not interested, and you guilt trip her about it, and she consents because she feels bad for you, feminists call that rape. You just raped her, according to the people who support UN Women. But what is this article, if not guilt tripping? Oh, women are going to die because you didn't give us money. The organization that launders money as part of the U.S. AIDS infection all over the world. Like, what is this? Have they been honest here? No. Have they talked about everything they do? No. Did they use an emotional appeal? Images of there's a child there, a little girl. There's a pregnant lady getting an ultrasound, and there's the girl on crutches. Right? They don't actually show much of UN Women's organized work. I noticed that there's no images of buildings, there's no images of food being handed out, there's no images of women's shelters that they're running, or any video of any of their educational initiatives, or no, just emotional. This is the kind of imagery that you see in those commercials. Send us money so we can rescue abused animals. Or the ones from back in the 90s with Sally Struthers and the starving children in Africa.
Yes.
That South Park made fun of. Turned her into Jabba the Hutt. Right? That's what we're looking at here. Weeping and gnashing of teeth. So when we actually look, what do UN Women do? I did a search on this. Organizations funded by UN Women that promote the Duluth model of addressing domestic violence. And there are quite a number of them. Right? Domestic Abuse Intervention Program, DAIP, the Duluth model, is the organization most directly associated with the development and promotion. It's not funded by UN Women, but these organizations do receive funding. Global Rights for Women works with UN Women. They adapt the Duluth model's framework all over the world. Coordinated Community Response Power and Control Wheel. The Coordinated Community Response thing is the one that one of the creators of it, when writing about it, pointed out that it was entirely ideologically based, not evidence-based. Praxis International, which we looked at in one of our previous shows, is another one that works with UN Women and other global partners to ensure fidelity of the Duluth model's methods. So they try to ensure that nations are employing this as opposed to other methods. So it's not just, you know, something that they use. They literally try to eliminate anything that's not this. But what they want you to see is this. They don't want you to see them falsely accusing men. They don't want you to see them treating domestic violence that is two-way as always only male perpetrated and the woman only defending herself. Right? They don't want you to see them protecting women who initiate domestic violence. They don't want you to see them protecting women who beat up their own kids or their own parents or their husband's parents. You go to places like India, there are many, many videos coming out of India of, the husband goes out and works and the wife stays home and takes care of the household. And part of the household that she's taking care of is the in-laws, and she hates them, and she does cruel, abusive things to them that are just, it's not neglect, it's actual violence. And it's not to gain compliance or anything like that. It's just random acts of violence for the sake of doing violence to these elderly people. But they don't show that, right? And they certainly don't talk about that as female violence. They don't talk about it as gender-based. What they talk about instead is the girl on crutches in Afghanistan who gets to see a doctor, even though Afghan girls don't get to see doctors. Somehow this one does. And they go on, they have their whole thing about victims of domestic violence. And you notice they will not show male victims here. It's all about women, all about girls. Even though, like I said, women and girls perpetrate 3 times as often as men and boys. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. I personally, I am definitely gloating about the loss of funding. I think it's bullshit that they're trying to emotionally appeal. Yeah, we don't even know it. That's a good point. Derek Workman in our Restream chat asks, how do we know this picture was taken in Afghanistan? We don't know. This could have been taken anywhere. This picture also could have been taken anywhere. Right? This says it's a health center in the eastern DRC, but do we know that to be true? And did this woman consent to having her picture taken like this and used on the internet? Right? We don't know if any of the claims that they're making have any basis in fact, because we do know that some of them don't, and that calls all of them into question. So, I don't have a bunch of super chats. I don't have super chats at all, I don't think, here. And I don't have Rumble rants, paid Rumble rants. But I do have a super chat from Meredith G, who sent us $5 and says, HBR Talk 385, honey for the Badgers. Thanks for the thought-provoking discussion. Like I said, the thoughts are going to be really provoked today, because they're going to think we're gloating over women being left out in the cold, denied food, and subject to violence. But the reality is, after our hard look at UN women and what they actually do, as opposed to what they say they do, and how they've demonized advocates for fathers' rights and equal treatment for men in court, men not being wrongly imprisoned, men not committing suicide, and so on. How they've demonized advocacy for equal access to education. How they've demonized recognition that treating masculinity as something toxic and evil is killing men. We really don't have any sympathy for the organization, right? The provoked thoughts might have a lot to say. The provoked thoughts might get very upset at the emotional appeals on these articles, and I expect to see more of them. They're going to come out. We'll see articles claiming that women are dying because of this. We'll see articles claiming that women are getting beaten because of this, being denied health care because of this. But we won't see proof.
All of this is happening because of the provoked thoughts. I know we would say that because we're in the business of blaming everything on the provoked thoughts. But, you know, you have to wonder at what point any of this is fucking true. And I think at some point, a great deal of this is true. Like, we're at the late stages of whatever the fuck it is we're talking about. And whatever the fuck it is we're talking about is at the point where if you put women in charge of everything, and you give and you give women's charge of everything, then they will go ahead and be like, well, we hate our own men, and so we will give our civilization over to the other men. And that's what's happening. And I know it's hard to get through to people who are to exist in the 10 years ago, of the people of the women who think they were based 10 years ago, to the women who thought, to the women who think that they're only just getting on board with what we were talking about 10 years ago. But what's happening now is happening because the women of 10 years ago didn't quite understand what was going on. And this is why we talk about the gender problems. Because the immigration problems are only happening because of the gender problems that existed 10 years ago. That we left our countries in charge of women who didn't know any better, and I guess men who didn't know any better as well. But yeah, this is We are losing our culture. We are losing our countries because we gave everything to these fucking stupid women who didn't know any better. And yeah, it's hard to get this across to people. To people who still to this day think that we should be prescribing everything in terms of how we should be prescribing everything in terms of the women who should know better. Like, we're still like everything's still going in the direction of look how victimized the women are. And
yeah, worldwide feminism is essentially the export of gynocentric oikophobia all over the world.
Yes, well done. We got here because of think of the women, and we're still doing everything because of think of the women. Like, I can understand us doing everything in terms of think of the children, but we're not doing things in terms of think of the children. We're doing everything in terms of think of the women. And I know you all aren't going to understand me framing things in terms of think of the men. Like, I know, like, no society ever is going to quite come to terms with the idea of think of the men. But,
Yeah.
you know, you can't quite even come to terms with the idea of things of think of the children. All you can think of is think of things in terms of the women. Like, when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to the Far East, when it comes to whatever fucking wars we're fighting, all you can think of is think of the women. And I'm like, you know, the women are the middle ground. The children are the lower ground, and the men are the upper ground. And I'm like, well done you for thinking of the middle ground. Yes, the women are the middle ground, but the children are the lower ground, and the men are the upper ground. How about, you know, can you think of the stuff in the middle? And the stuff in the middle is the men. I know that's hard to get your head around, because that doesn't quite get into your brain in terms of stuff. But yeah, weirdly, the top of your morality is the women, and the bottom of your morality is the children. The middle, weirdly, is the men, and that's why you can't get a hold of it. Like, what if you cared about men just as much as you cared about the women and the children? Maybe you should. I know it sounds counterintuitive. I know, because it seems like women are important and children are important. But maybe men are important as well. I know it sounds weird. I know it sounds counterintuitive in terms of whatever morality you've been taught to believe in. But, you know, what if men are important and women are important and children are important? What if all three of these groups were important?
There you
I
go,
know,
talking sense again.
It's mad. It's mad, I know. But, you know, it's something to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, feminists would call that misogyny. And the dumb thing about them calling that misogyny is you consider the messages, the opposite messages, the opposing messages that men and women are given about the importance of the service that they provide to their family and community, right? I can't count how many times someone has told me that because so many people, I've put myself in a position in which many people depend on me for things. I have my family, I have my work, and then I have my activism. And in each of those areas, there are people who rely on me for work and caregiving. And so I've been told you have to take care of yourself because you're important, because you people depend on you, and you can't let yourself go. You can't fail to take care of yourself. And what happens if something happens to you? What happens if you become incapacitated, or even if you just sick and you're down for a long time? Other people aren't going to be able to step in and do what you do, and so on. I get told that in every area of my life, and it's not entirely true. There are, and I've found that at work when I had to take time off due to my parents' illnesses before both of them died. There were people that stepped in and did what I did. And at home, my family managed. It wasn't as easy for them as it was when I was there. But when I had to be in another city for 5 weeks at a time, my family didn't fold up and go away. And, Honey Badger Radio managed just fine without me. The entire men's rights movement managed just fine without me. It doesn't mean I don't contribute anything, but it does mean that, I'm a little more disposable than people tell me, right? But they don't tell me that I'm a little more disposable because I'm female. But at the other end of it, men and boys, they don't get told because your family would be broke if you didn't earn the bread, right? Your family would be in trouble if you weren't there to protect them. Who is going to look out for your kids if you're not around? They don't get told that. They get treated like they're disposable. They get told, suck it up and drive on. You owe them because they depend on you. And if you work yourself to death, that's better than letting them down for 5 minutes, right? That's the way that men and boys get treated. It is exactly the opposite of the message that is given to women and girls. And in most cases, if the man of the household is eliminated from the household, it causes bigger problems. Not just the immediate financial problems, but when you look at research on what happens to children who grow up without an involved father, their whole life trajectory is changed. And it's changed in a much bigger way than if they grow up without an involved mother. And this is something that people are going to balk at hearing. They're not going to like hearing that fathers are actually the more important parent, and we should be valuing and preserving them. They're not going to want to hear that we should take care of and protect our utility workers, because what the fuck is going to happen to our community if they all die? Right? But because they're men, people want to talk about how much risk should be acceptable. Well, we should accept the fact that a certain number of them are going to die on the job. Why are we accepting that? Right? Because they're men. And They're just treated as disposable. So yeah, and we need to stop doing that. Our world needs to stop doing that. It needs to become recognizable that a larger number of incidents of violence is a bigger emergency than a smaller number of incidents of the same type of violence. That a larger incidence of violent and wrongful death is a bigger emergency than a smaller incidence of violent and wrongful death. And the sex of the people that it's happening to doesn't change that. No matter what UN Women says. And honestly, pushing men out of the family, trying to eliminate cultures of extended family unity and extended family support doesn't really serve the interests of women. That's not something that they're not doing that because it helps women. They're doing that because it gives these organizations lots of power. And it doesn't actually help anybody. It doesn't help the children. It doesn't protect the men. Exporting gynocentric oikophobia does nothing but destroy societies. And if you're listening from somewhere in the world where that export is happening to your community, resist it with all your might. It has absolutely wreaked havoc on the United States. About half of the children in this country now are raised in broken homes, and the poverty, what we call poverty here in the United States anyway, the incidence of it has increased. The incidence of depending on government so much that you don't have an alternative means of surviving if government doesn't fund your lifestyle. It's huge here. The divorce rate is high. The rate of people getting into trouble, men in particular, getting into trouble with the law and ending up just spending their lives in and out of jail is incredibly high here for a first world country. And especially a country in which you don't go to jail for having political perspectives. You go to jail for stealing and engaging in violence against other people, committing fraud, which is just another type of stealing, destroying property, stuff like that. Committing murders, unless you're a woman and you kill your unborn children. That's kosher here. And the leading cause of death, human death in the United States, if you count it as death, is being aborted at the request of your mother in an elective abortion. Those are the consequences of gynocentric oikophobia. So if your nation hasn't already been taken over, I know we have some listeners in South American countries and some listeners in African countries, because I've been contacted by people from various countries where the primary language is Spanish or French because of where the country is. But don't let feminism take your country over. It is terrible for the people of your country. And contrary to what the emotional appeal in these images would indicate, your country, your culture, your communities, your people can provide aid and care for the most vulnerable in your population without feminism. You don't need feminism to give crutches to a girl who needs them. You don't need feminism to have doctors, right? You don't need feminism to have women learn to read. You don't need feminism to ensure that violence is eliminated from households. Feminism doesn't do that. If it did, there would be no household violence here in the U.S. There would be no family violence here. We would have plenty of medical treatment and good advice for pregnant women. We wouldn't have one of the highest rates of maternal death in all of the first world nations of the world. We have higher rates of maternal death than some third world nations here from preventable causes that we're just not allowed to tell women how to prevent, because that's fat shaming. Feminism isn't going to help your country, and it's not going to help the women of your country. Don't let that infiltrate your country. So, but with that, I think I'm going to call it. It's after 9 o'clock. And I think we've talked about this as much as we really can, and several subjects that are somewhat related, but not necessarily directly. So with that, I'm going to say thanks to everyone for listening.
Word.
Thanks to my two co-hosts for going over this with me. And thanks to everyone who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen, especially Brian, without whom we would not have the vertical version at all. Good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.